So now we have made observations and we have to come up with a hypothesis. There was actually an official body called National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is like Technological Institute here in Denmark. We have two of them. There's one in Høje here outside of Copenhagen and one in Aarhus. And this is an institution which takes care of everything about standardization and regulations within the natural sciences and all kinds of technology, building technology, measuring technology. And maybe some of you know that if the instrument is not calibrated, what you can do, you can, there's a guy coming from the Technological Institute, and he calibrates your instrument and he writes a bill. And but NIST, as it's called in the business for abbreviation, is 400 times bigger, because it's a leading institution in the world playing, because American technology is so important. So there are 5,000-6,000 scientists actually employed at NIST. But it's not an independent body. It's under the Secretary of Commerce in the United States, and each time they change administration, there's a new director of NIST. Now they got the enterprise of actually writing reports of the technical collapses of World Trade Center. In 2002, they got $16 million from Congress, which is peanuts in this connection. And the first thing they did was to take out Building 7 as a separate investigation, which was not true. We know that they started to work on it actually from day one, but they didn't tell us. And the report on the towers came out in 2005. I returned to that after the intermission, because the first part here is about 7, and we'll take the towers after the intermission. And the report on Building 7 was postponed repeatedly. Every half year they said, oh, the report on the towers will come in half a year. And finally they couldn't hold it back any longer. So in 2008, there was a preliminary report in August, and the final version came in early October. And this is actually what we have to relate to. Time does not permit me to go through the NIST report. From a scientific point of view and as a scientific document, it is flawed to a degree which is criminal. I don't hesitate to say that. It's so bad. It's really bad science. If you want to know what bad science is, you should read the NIST report. But all we have to do, we will just concentrate, because we don't have time to bother with it. Their main conclusions are these two. First, the one that the structural damage of Building 7 was minor and not decisive. And they said that because in the 7 years between the event and the publication of their report, there were many speculations about why Building 7 would come down. And one of them was that it was so severely damaged by the falling debris from the North Tower that it was obvious that it was simply destroyed. But this was not true, and simply is not true. In earlier incarnations and versions of this presentation, I actually went through what is known about the structural damage, and it amounts to at the most 7 of the 57 perimeter columns which were damaged. It would not intimidate the structural integrity of Building 7. And NIST certifies this conclusion. The structural damage does not prevail. But what NIST say that Building 7 collapsed primarily due to conventional office fires. And this is a daring proposition. For that simple reason, that this should be the first time in history that you observe such a thing from a steel-framed high-riser. We have to take a little look at these fires. And this is from the NIST report. The decisive fires here on 6 floors, on the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 11th, 12th, and 13th floor. And these are the exact minutes, the time when fires were observed. There was also minor fires in the morning, but all of them were gone out at 1 o'clock. Between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, there were no fires observed. And since there's still 3 hours to go until the collapse time, so maybe we only have to bother about this. So you don't have to measure to remember these numbers, but you should know that it is very accurately documented by NIST themselves. So on the 7th floor, fire was observed at 2 o'clock to 3:15 and 4:15 until 5 minutes later. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to remember this. But let's take a look at the fires, because many people, or you see sometimes on websites, that it was an inferno of fire. Let's take a look. The first picture I show you is actually the only documentation of fire occurring prior to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's from the southwest corner here, and I show you for this only reason. This is the only documentation of fires before 1 o'clock. And it was gone out at 1 o'clock. But what you see here is these numbers are referring to the floors. So this is the 29th floor, and you can see there's been a fire, and here it's gone out. There's still something happening in this office. Here on the 30th floor, there's obviously it's gone out here and here. It's still happening in here, maybe also here. But these are gone out, and there's still 5 hours to go. Okay. More interesting from our perspective is what's happened during the afternoon. We're on the other side of the building now. This is the east facade here. We're around 11th, 12th floor up here. And here's a close-up of the same area where you see the 11th, 12th floor. The small numbers here are referring to the numbering of the perimeter columns. And they're going from 1 to 57 all the way around. Meaning that you have a very convenient coordinate system of the whole exterior, because you only have to refer to the floor and to the perimeter column next to it. Then you know exactly where you are. Time now here is about 2:30. 15 minutes later, or a little more, we're approaching 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the north facade, and we see a little fire here on the 12th floor, and we see a little fire here on the 7th floor. 15 minutes later, the fire on the 12th floor has moved a little bit towards the west. Excuse me, I have a cold coming up. So the fire here on the 12th floor has moved a little to the west. Here on the 7th floor, also there's a little satellite fire coming out here. It is so that office fires, they don't last more than 20 minutes. For that simple reason that if it's an ordinary office, there's nothing more to burn after 20 minutes, and then it levels off. So the fire even has to move on or die. And so this is what we observe here. This fire here is moving west. The time is 3 p.m. Here it's 15 minutes later. On the 12th floor, it has gone out here. It has moved a little bit to the west. Here on the 7th floor, it has gone out here, and it's only living a little bit west. Remember, is to your right. This is the north side we're observing here. Here we are back on the same corner as I showed you a few slides ago. And we see on the 12th, 13th floor now the fire has gone out here. Down on the 8th floor, there has been fires. And here, obviously, they've gone out here. There's an awful smoke coming out of this office here. Maybe he forgot his winter tires in the office, who knows? And at this point, I'm usually asked, now, all this smoke here, where does that come from? Well, some of it comes from Building 7. Nobody argues that it was actually smoldering. Is that a good English word for a very low intensity fire? But this is what happening. There was smoke coming out of Building 7. And at that day you had a weak northern wind coming in from here. You can also see that the smoke is going around the corner. So the wind is coming in here. So on the back side of Building 7 there was a swirl coming this way up. So some of the smoke, probably the black stuff here, is from Building 7. But most of the smoke you see here is from World Trade Center 5, which was lying behind World Trade Center 7. And what did World Trade Center 5 look like at this time? It looked like this. It was actually burning quite vividly. And there's no sound of this. I can talk over this. It was also a steel frame, but it was only 9 stories high, so it doesn't count as a high-rise. But it remains standing, I should say. But you can enjoy actually the fires here, if you think it is enjoyable. These pictures are taken seconds before collapse, where we are in 2001, and you had digital cameras with a timestamp. So from that reason, you know exactly which time this was taken on. Also, there's a little kink on the penthouse here, which was indicative, which was just prior to collapse. Actually, the penthouse came down. We'll not go into that detail. This picture has been time determined by NIST themselves from the slope of the shadows. And if you're a good astronomer, you can tell exactly what the time is once you know from the slope of these, and you can go up and make observations. There are also a point, I think, about the street lights coming up. So this is seconds before collapse, and point is here, I just simply can't see it's burning anywhere. At this time, apparently, the fires, at least in the views we have here, was gone out. So if people talking about infernos was definitely not correct, there were small, random fires in Building 7. Question, please.
Do they know what started these small fires?
No, we don't know what started these small fires. And it is interesting. NIST claims that the fires were started by the falling debris from the North Tower at 10:29. The North Tower came down 10:30. And they claim that these fires were started by the falling debris at that time. But according to their own account, there were no observed fires between 1 and 2 o'clock. So your question remains blowing in the wind, I'm sorry. We don't know. Yeah, I have my hypothesis, but it is speculation. Now, so we go back to NIST's conclusions. The collapse was primarily due to conventional office fire. And I said that this was a daring proposition because it has never been observed before. And now we are again at a very basic property of natural science, because natural science is based on experience. And so we have to look at other fires in steel-framed high-rises. That is, that we are testing NIST hypothesis with holding it up against other observations. It's all very basic. And so here are some other fires, famous fires. There have been more than 100 of these. I'll only show a few. 1991 in Philadelphia. It raged for 18 hours, and you can see there are actually fires going on. It cleared 8 floors. The building remained standing. Another famous fire is in 1988, Los Angeles, where it was out of control for 3.5 hours. I have read the summary of the fire report, and there were, this is a quote, there was no damage to main structural members in the building. More recent events down at the Persian Gulf, in Doha, the capital of Qatar. You'll see this high-riser here. It is burning quite vividly. Caracas, Venezuela, it was raging for 17 hours, over 26 stories. The building remained standing. And also there has been fires in World Trade Center, actually many fires, many small fires. And there were 6 firemen on the alert 24 hours round the clock. Because at that time, you know, it was allowed to smoke in the offices. So usually there was a waste basket taking off, and they just put out these fires. But in '75, there was a serious fire in the North Tower. And for some reason, all the pictures from this fire has disappeared. You simply, there's no way you can get them, they're gone. So I can show you this report. Unfortunately, it's been cut off a little bit by a projector, but it is from New York Times, and it tells about a fire which occurred over 10 floors and lasted more than 3 hours. And what happens on this occasion, the building remained standing, obviously. This was '75. But what happens after a fire in a steel frame is that you call on the engineering company and they come to take a look. And if there are any steel beams which has been bended or twisted or otherwise corrupted, they simply pull out the steel beams and put in some new ones. They can do that. But in this case, and this is another quote from the report, the fire did not cause any structural damage. So they just opened the windows and let the fresh air come in and renewed the carpets and the paintings on the walls and kept on working. People may ask, has it ever happened that an aeroplane has hit a steel frame? Oh yes. And this is another very famous profile from the New York skyline, namely the Empire State Building. It happened in 1945 that a poor pilot actually lost his way in his fog. He was to land in the fog. He was to land on LaGuardia Airport on the other side of the Hudson River, and he simply lost his way and slammed his B-25 bomber into Empire State Building. No bombs on board, but a lot of jet fuel. No, this is not jet fuel because it's a propeller machine. Actually, the gasoline you use for propellers are burning much better. This is much more like car gasoline. It's burning much better than jet fuel. But he slammed it into the top up here. The hole should be up here. And this is a close-up of the hole. And this actually is the only fire which has been, what you would say, properly extinguished by the firemen. Because they put out the fire in 40 minutes. And 1 week afterwards, the people working on the floors below this impact hole was on work. And those of you who have been to New York recently know that the Empire State Building is still here, even though it actually suffered the impact of a B-25 bombing machine. It's a very famous bomber from World War II. So we must conclude, you can consider each of these fires as an experiment. And natural scientists, we love experiments. And afterwards we make an observation. After each of these fires, you make the observation that the building remains standing. You repeat the experiments, excuse me, they're not real experiments, but you can consider them experiments. There have been controlled experiments actually in steel frame buildings, but I don't have time to account for that. But indeed, you can consider all these observations and accumulate them. When you have seen the same phenomenon occurring at a sufficient number of times, you get convinced. And this is how science is working. It's called a proof of induction. When you make the same observation sufficient number of times, you draw the conclusion, steel frame high-rises do not collapse due to fire, period. That's it. We could stop here and go home. But then I will entertain you a little. So now NIST has a problem here. We all have a problem if we believe in the official version of events for that day. We all have a problem. We are in a situation here where we have tested the hypothesis, held it up against observations. We have found out that it does not hold water. And I told you I could spend half an hour go through the NIST report, and their account of the collapse is simply so flawed that I'll not waste your time. I have more interesting things to tell. But we are here in the situation where the hypothesis is wrong and not sufficient, because you can never expect free fall when a building does not collapse due to fire. So you have to think and try again. And this is an ordinary, very plain cycle in science. You make your observation, say, that's a bad hypothesis. We go back and take a look again, and we do some rethinking. Eventually, we make some more experiments. So now I will come up with a new hypothesis. And I will take off from an interim report which NIST published in 2004. In this report, 2004, in this report they stated very bluntly that NIST has seen no evidence that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was caused by bombs, missiles, or controlled demolition. Hey, who's talking about bombs? nobody's talking about missiles. And what is controlled demolition? Well, controlled demolition is, I'll show you in a little while. But first I'll show you a video with a Dutch demolition expert who has seen, I don't know how many demolitions in his lifetime. He's a leading expert of a Dutch, he died recently, of one of Europe's leading demolition companies. And Dutch television put him in front of a TV screen, and as more than half of you, he had never seen Building 7 before. He did not know what he was watching. It is in Dutch, but I hope this version come up here with English subtitles.
De mensen die geloven in het complot hebben het vaak over gebouw nummer 7. Dat was een wolkenkrabber van 47 verdiepingen naast de Twin Towers. Op 11 september 2001 heeft er brand gewoed, maar er is nooit een vliegtuig in gevlogen. Toch is ook dit gebouw op 11 september ingestort. Deze gebeurtenis heeft nooit veel aandacht gekregen en ook Denny Jowenko heeft er nooit van gehoord. Zijn reactie op de beelden die we laten zien is onbevangen.
Zie je vanaf boven gaan? Nee, je gaat vanaf onder.
Je gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Er is nagesprongen.
Dit valt anders dan het World Trade Center.
Vind je niet dan?
Ja, je ziet het, de onderste verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, en de rest zakt er gewoon in. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten.
Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dat heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten de 11e? Kan helemaal waar zijn.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center naar beneden viel.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt.
In het officiële onderzoeksrapport van FEMA staat dat ze niet kunnen verklaren waarom gebouw nummer 7 is ingestort. Uitgebreid bespreken we alle mogelijke oorzaken met Denny Jowenko.
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar het hebben wel...
Maar hij blijft erbij dat het gebouw is opgeblazen.
Het is vakwerk, zonder meer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens.
De vraag is dan, is zoiets van tevoren voorbereid of kan dat op 11 september zelf nog zijn besloten en uitgevoerd?
Met hoeveel man heeft u hoeveel tijd nodig om dat te doen?
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar...
Maakt u een inschatting?
Ja, dan moet je wel ervaren mensen hebben, maar als je een man of 30 of 40 zou hebben... Kijk, een paar met de snijbrander, de rest brengt hem aan. Andere mensen sluiten dat deadcord met die boosters aan. Dat moet allemaal precies op hetzelfde moment gaan. En weer een derde die zet de elektronische systemen erop. En dan gaat hij.
Terwijl overal brand was en ook in dat gebouw was brand.
Dat is niet geblust.
Ze hebben de brand niet geblust. Dus de mensen die dat moesten doen, die moesten het doen terwijl het binnen nog brandde.
Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Daar heb ik geen verklaring voor.
So now we are getting an impression what a controlled demolition is. I'll show you a few other examples of controlled demolitions. Maybe some of you know this picture. It's a very famous picture by a Belgian artist. Yes, a question?
There is no sound of explosion.
The sound of explosions?
Yeah.
During the collapse of Building 7?
Yeah.
Yes. Not as numerous as the towers, which we'll return to after the break. But the situation at that time was that they had actually cleared all the space around Building 7 already at noon at a distance of 5 blocks. So people were kept outside at a distance of at least half a kilometer, 500 meters. But the rescue workers within what you call the lines reported explosions. But as you will learn during my presentation, and also there was actually many accounts occurring in the morning actually of explosions. We may return to that later. But the chemists who make explosions can make explosives which are fast, which are slow, which are very noisy, which are very quiet. And I'll also in the end show you how you can actually bring buildings down without making any noise at all. But I would like to return to your question when we consider the towers after the break. Because in that time there was actually made a series of interviews with the firefighters, whether they heard explosions. So please remind me to take up the questions again. Now here is an Italian artist who put World Trade 7 between a controlled demolition from Italy. This is in slow motion to give you an impression. And there are some small details actually that he observed. These are called squibs. We'll return to that later on, which please notice that they are moving from the bottom up here, and also it's probably some Italian building. And also the huge amount of dust which are formed in controlled demolitions. We'll return to that as well. Now, so regarding the explosions here, I'll show you another video which I think is more instructive. This is very fast. You see, you'll get in slow motion, and it'll come afterwards. And I haven't had time to edit this video. And in the meantime, we can enjoy how the dust are expanding in what you call pyroclastic clouds. These are hot dust clouds. They are very, very hot. Actually, people got burned from the dust. And you only see pyroclastic dust clouds from controlled demolitions and from volcanoes, obviously. Now here is the slow motion. This is an Austin, and please notice that the explosions are going from the bottom up. This is not a pancaking effect. You can see the explosions in Building 7 moving from the bottom up. I have a little one here. This is in real time. The same thing, where you can see the explosions are moving from the down up. And the artist has looped and poof, 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 okay? Yeah, it's almost a dance, but it's serious enough. You can see how the explosions is going from the bottom upwards on the western side of the building here. So something was going on. So this, when you have seen this sufficiently many times, that I think end here with and conclude until further. We may return to this when we have taken a look at the towers, that the observation that we have made, free fall, a completely symmetrical course of collapse of the buildings, we saw it coming all the way down, and this is only observed in controlled demolition, makes us conclude that Building 7 was a controlled demolition. In particular, you as a scientist and knowledgeable in physics should recognize Isaac Newton on this, that the free fall is a completely unambiguous proof of controlled demolition. So I will leave you hanging with this, and we'll take an intermission. For I suggest, how much do you want, Jay? How much intermission should we take? I think 10 minutes, okay. I'm actually